In today's video, we take a closer look at the brand new Xenos Rampant, Miniatures Rules for Science Fiction Wargaming Battles from Osprey Games. Well, hi everyone, and welcome to the Old Hammered YouTube channel. My name is Lee. I'll be your host today, and Lynn is going to join us a little bit later when we get to the demo portion of today's presentation. So today I'm going to try to share some first impressions of and gameplay basics for Xenos Rampant, the brand new hardback rule set for science fiction wargame battles from Osprey Games, written by Daniel Mersey and Richard Cowen. And as always with these kinds of things, just because I read the book over the last couple days doesn't mean I actually comprehended anything correctly, so please take everything that follows with a grain of salt. So Daniel Mersey is, of course, the author of Lion Rampant, Dragon Rampant, and several other Rampant-style rulebooks, which inspired wargame enthusiast Richard Cowen to write the initial Xenos Rampant rule set, which was sort of an unofficial sci-fi mod layered on top of the Rampant core mechanics. Well, the idea apparently intrigued the right people because Mersey and Cowen put their heads together and wrote this brand new 192-page official version of Xenos Rampant, which is self-described as a setting-agnostic, large skirmish miniature wargame for fighting science fiction battles. When the game refers to large skirmish, it means that it is usually played with detachments of 50 or fewer models per side and a very limited number of vehicles. Setting agnostic means that the rules work for most of your popular sci-fi wargaming genres, including grimdark, space opera, near future, diesel punk, zombie apocalypse, and so forth. Which is actually where a lot of the page count comes from. The actual Xenos Rampant rules are covered in about 90 pages, while the rest of the book is devoted to basic scenarios and campaign rules, as well as additional rules and pre-generated detachments for playing the game in weird war, urban fantasy, alien invasion, post-apocalypse, and space opera settings. So yeah, once you get a handle on the core mechanics, you can put a lot of different skins on this game, and you're not tied to any specific fictional universe or miniature line. Just use whatever figures you have in the setting you want. So the standard game of Xenos Rampant is kind of designed to be played with 24-point detachments on a 4x4 mat, but you can scale that up or down depending on the size of your table and the number of minis you want to field. Our mat here is about 3x3, which doesn't sound that much different, but that's 9 square feet versus 16 square feet on a 4x4, so it's quite a bit smaller. So we're going to try scaling our detachments back to about 18 points and see how that goes. Another option would be to play the game with smaller miniatures, like maybe 15 millimeters, and then measure all the movement stats and weapon ranges in centimeters, but we don't have any 15 millimeter minis, so the point's kind of moot. So an 18-point detachment, what does that mean exactly? Well, you build your detachment from a selection of units, including elite infantry, heavy infantry, light infantry, berserk infantry, etc. Each unit has a base points cost, so for example, elite infantry, the best of the best, have a base cost of 6 points, which you can then increase or decrease somewhat with varying options. Giving your elite infantry super heavy armor, for example, increases their cost by 2. Close quarters doctrine, on the other hand, decreases their cost by a point because it reduces their shooting range. Each unit has various stats, which may look familiar if you've played other Rampant-style games. The final stat is strength points, not to be confused with the point cost. But anyway, strength points is 5 in the case of elite infantry, and this number represents the unit's general health and combat effectiveness. The easiest way to represent strength points on the table is to have one figure for each strength point in the unit. So in this case, there would be 5 elite infantry models, and each time one is killed, you simply remove him from the table, and now this unit is down to 4 strength points. Once a unit drops to half of its starting strength points or below, its number of attack dice drops from 10 to 5. That's one of the things I really liked when we played Dragon Rampant. No matter what the unit was, it rolled 10 attack dice when it was above 50% strength, and 5 attack dice when it was 50% or below. 10 dice or 5 dice, that's it. So how does that work exactly? Well, let's say these guys here are shooting. Every die roll that's at or above the unit's shooting stat is going to be a hit. You simply add up the hits, and then the defender's armor stat will indicate how many hits are needed to cause a casualty. Easy peasy. Of course, a defender's armor stat might be modified up or down slightly, depending on the situation. For example, if we upgraded our elite infantry with armor-piercing ammo at the cost of 1 point, then the defender's armor stat would be reduced by 1. Conversely, hardcover, like a stone wall, would increase the defender's armor stat by 2, and softcover would increase it by 1. Anyway, getting back to strength points and model counts. As I said, the easiest way to represent a 5 or 10 strength point unit is to simply put 5 or 10 models on the table. However, Xenos Rampant allows for reduced model count units, which means your 5 strength elite infantry unit could be represented by 2 armored super soldiers or a single fighter in a battle suit. In those cases, you could just mark the wounds or casualties suffered using a die or something like that. The stats for the unit stay exactly the same, no matter how many models you're using to represent it. So let's take a look at some sample 18-point detachments. As I said, 24 points is kind of the standard detachment size, but you can scale that up or down. The whole detachment building process is relatively easy, but if you should find yourself at a loss, the rulebook is loaded with pre-generated detachment lists for things like SWAT teams, rural cultists, men in black, special forces, UFO invaders, road warriors, the living dead, evil empire, space pirates, robot overlords, extra-dimensional entities, super soldiers, and a host of others. So we could have used any one of those, but I really wanted to build some lists based on some minis we have, so that's what I'm going to show you here today. So here we have a warp demon cult led by this gigantic putrid entity. To represent this big boss, we're going to say he is equivalent to a unit of greater xenomorphs, which would cost us 4 points. Now this unit could be represented by 5 models, that is 5 greater xenomorphs, as it has 5 strength points. But we're going to make it a reduced model count unit, represented by 1 gigantic, horrific entity. Also, each detachment has to have a commander. So basically you pick a model from any unit and say, this guy is going to be our commander right here. That doesn't change the unit stats in any way, though each commander will have a random commander trait and will give a buff to nearby units when they're trying to make activation rolls or courage checks. Okay, so for our warp demons, this gigantic greater xenomorph unit here, represented by a single model, is also going to be our detachment commander. Looking at his available options, we are going to buff him with high-powered blades for 1 point, and a ranged attack for 2 points, bringing his total cost to 7 points. Then we will take Close Quarters Doctrine for -1 point, and Area of Effect for +1 point, and that will reduce his range, but also give his range attack the ability to ignore cover, because I assume his ranged attack is really just projectile vomit. So each unit has a list of optional upgrades available to it, but in addition to that, there are also these Xeno rules, which are essentially exotic upgrades available to most, but not all troop types. Keeping with the theme of his detachment, we are going to purchase Demonic for the big green guy, and that costs 0 points because it confers both advantages and disadvantages to him. So when we add up the base cost and the upgrades, we have spent 7 points on our big baddie here, leaving us 11 to build the rest of the detachment, which we will have to spend wisely. So unfortunately, we do not have the points to make these guys elite infantry, so these guys will have to be heavy infantry instead. So these guys have a base cost of 2, and we're going to spend another 2 to upgrade them with a heavy weapon, which means that whenever they shoot, if they roll a 6, that's going to count as 2 hits instead of 1, so it's pretty useful. And even though we have a model with the special/heavy weapon there, you can't snipe individual models in this game. So once these guys have paid for the heavy weapon ability, it will stay with them as long as they are still on the table. These Beastmen, I think, will work great for Berserk Infantry. The base cost of a Berserk Infantry unit is only 2 points, but we will give these guys high-powered blades for another point, so they are more effective in close combat. So that brings their total up to 3. Next, we'll take a unit of lesser xenomorphs, represented by these warp demons here. The base cost of the unit is only 2 points, but we will give them high-powered blades for an additional point. And from the Xeno rules, we will also give them Demonic, which costs 0 points because it has advantages and disadvantages. So now we have 1 point left to spend, which is just enough to get a 10-man unit of Militia Rabble, which has no special rules and will get no upgrades because we are out of points. So that is our 5-unit, 18-point detachment of Warp Demons. Now let's look at a more conventional force of Space Marines and Colonial Troopers who will be trying to defend the outpost against demonic incursions. So the backbone of this detachment is a unit of heavy infantry right here, which also includes the detachment commander. The base cost for heavy infantry is 2 points, but we're going to give them increased squad size for another 2 points, which essentially means that the heavy infantry will go from 5 Space Marines to 10 Space Marines. This increases some of their stats, but it will also allow them to take more casualties before their combat effectiveness drops. Okay, so we spent 4 points on heavy infantry. Now let's buy some light infantry. The base cost for light infantry is only 1 point, but we're going to increase their squad to 10 men for an additional 2 points and give them a heavy weapon for another 2, so that is 5 points in total. This unit of support infantry here has a base cost of 5 points. Yikes! So they're pretty expensive. They have no hand-to-hand attack value, but their support weapon is going to be excellent for mowing down enemy troops at long range, especially lightly armored troops like militia rabble. Let's just hope they don't get charged by any berserk infantry, because as I said, close combat just isn't their bag. We have just 4 points left out of our 18 now, so we are going to purchase another heavy infantry unit, this time represented by a single Imperial robot. We will give him a heavy weapon for 2 points, and the mechanoid rule from the Xeno list for 0 points, because being a mechanoid has both advantages and disadvantages, which is why it costs nothing. So one of the great things about Xenos Rampant is you can just pull several squads off the shelf, and then try to make them fit the points you have to spend by using reduced model count units and or selecting various options to increase or even decrease the cost of the units you're working with. Okay, so now that we've built 2 18-point detachments, let's go through a very simple demonstration turn. I'm not going to drill down into the minutiae of the rules because I haven't really absorbed them all, but we will try to fumble through some of the basics, and like I said, if you played other Rampant games, then some of this may seem very familiar. Okay, so we're back. We have set up the table for a short demo here, and as you can see, our table is a little bit small for this game. This is a 3x3 mat, and really this should be played on a 4x4, so we've kind of placed our forces tightly packed as if the fog of war kind of had blocked their line of sight, and all of a sudden it lifted and they found they're in the thick of the enemy. And poor Lynn is kind of jumping in cold here. We played Dragon Rampant, I think, about 15 months ago. That's the last time we played a Rampant-style game. So we're just going to try to fumble through it, and as we kind of figure out the different mechanics, we'll explain them to you, and we'll all learn together. But hopefully, if we do a turn here, that'll at least show you some of the basics and give you a sense of how the game is played.
This will be very killy.
It'll be very, very killy, and that's why I think our table is probably too small for this game. We kind of got away with Dragon Rampant because there wasn't that many missile troops, but since most of the people here can shoot, a table of this size is probably too tiny, unless you had 15mm or 10mm miniatures, in which case it might be just right. So I kind of just threw everyone together so they were in the thick of it. So the human support infantry is up here on this trailer, and then we have some human heavy infantry down here. And then we have a heavy infantry squad here, which is represented by a single mechanoid. So he is a reduced model count unit. So these guys are a full model count unit. In fact, they are an enhanced squad. They have 10 rather than 5, and this guy just has 1 to represent the normal 5. So that is the difference between those two types of things. Over here on the back of the board, we have the greater xenomorph, we have his berserk infantry, we have his heavy infantry, and here are warp demons representing the lesser xenomorphs. So they have no shooting, but they're good in hand-to-hand. And then over here we have the 10-man unit of light infantry with the heavy weapon. Now you may notice that there are no cultists on the board. I sort of eliminated the rabble militia because the board was just too small. There wasn't quite room for them, so we're just going to go with 4 units apiece. But that's okay because the rabble militia only cost 1 point anyway, so their impact on the battle would have been minimal. Okay, so Lynn is going to be playing the warp demons, so we're going to go into a sample turn. So again, just imagine that these guys stumbled toward each other in the fog of war, and so now they've discovered they're in the middle of a battle with the enemy in close proximity. So we'll just go into a sample turn and kind of show you how that goes. So thankfully, Xenos Rampant provides you with a handy reference sheet to help you activate your units. And this was actually a PDF I found for free on the Osprey Wargames website, so you could download that and check it out if you're interested, but it's also included in the book. So, according to this sheet, activating your units, the first thing you do is rally any suppressed units. Since we're going into this as a first turn, essentially, none of our units have been suppressed, but if they had, let's say they had had a bad combat result, failed their courage roll on a previous turn, and were suppressed, they would try to have to recover first thing. Then we go to wild charges, and the Xenomorphs have quite a few wild charges they need to check for. Now, normally, the large Xenomorph here, the greater Xenomorph, would have wild charge, but because we upgraded him with a missile weapon, his Vomitus, he doesn't have that anymore, so that's been eliminated. But these Berserk Infantry have wild charge, as do these lesser Xenomorphs right here. Now, if you fail a wild charge check, then your guys don't do anything, but you don't lose your activation. During the regular, normal activation part of the phase, if you're selecting units and activating them and you fail an activation order, then your activation ends and it goes to the other person. So you want to be careful in how you select which units to activate, but that doesn't apply to wild charges. They just kind of go forth, so they either wild charge or they don't. So you have to measure to see whether they are in range of a unit to even charge. If they aren't, that's fine. They don't have to do anything. You can just wait till the normal activation part of the turn and try to activate them then. But if they are in range of another unit, you have to check to see if they just go berserk and charge forward. So that would be these guys over here and these berserk militia here. So which one do you want to check first?
Let's check the lesser Xenos.
The lesser Xenos. So that means you're going to roll 2 dice to check for wild charge, and if it is equal to or higher than the unit's attack characteristic, it immediately carries out an attack activation against the enemy of your choice that it can see within range. So how far do the lesser Xenos move?
12 inches.
12 inches. So they could charge these heavy infantry over here, or they could charge the heavy infantry in the form of the mechanoid.
The mechanoid.
Charge the mechanoid. So the attack activation number for the lesser Xenos is a 5+. So roll 2 dice. And you got a 9, so they charge. Charge! They charge in to the mechanoid. Now some units will have countercharge, which means they can try to countercharge and sort of meet them in the middle, but I don't think the mechanoid has that. So these lesser Xenos have wild charged this mechanoid. So you're going to roll 10 dice because the lesser Xenos are at full strength. Anything that is a 4 or better is going to be a hit because that's their attack value. And then the mechanoid's armor is 3. So you're going to need 3 hits to do a wound. Okay, pull out all the 4s. So originally we thought that the mechanoid had an armor of 3, which means 3 hits would have caused 1 wound, and this would have been an excess, so it would have been discarded. But Linda reminded me that these Xenomorphs have high-powered blades. We gave them high-powered blades, and so that actually reduces the mechanoid's armor by 1, which would bring it down to 2. So that means every 2 dice cause a wound. So that's 4 hits for a total of 2 wounds off the mechanoid, bringing him down to 3. Okay, so now the mechanoid is going to attack back using his defense value, which is 5+. So he's going to roll 10 dice. And anything that is a 5 or above is going to be a hit on the lesser Xenomorphs who have an armor of 3. And the poor mechanoid does not have high power blades or anything like that, though he does have a heavy weapon if he gets a chance to shoot at some point. Okay, mechanoid defending, he needs a 5+. And he got 4. And I think the Xenomorphs have an armor of 3. So discard 1. That's 1 hit off the Xenomorphs. And you can just take out a model because they have 5 models to represent their 5 strength points. Okay, so the mechanoid lost 2 strength points and the Xenomorphs lost 1. It says that the unit that lost the most strength points during the attack must retreat. So because he's a mechanoid, he doesn't have to take a courage test, so he doesn't have to worry about being suppressed after retreating. But he does have to retreat. So that means he has to move half of his maximum movement. He can try to seek cover if he wants to, but he doesn't have to. So he can't end up within 1 inch of another unit, if there was another unit back here. And if he went too far, he would end up off the board. But I think he's just going to retreat kind of around this way. So his maximum movement is only 6 inches, so he moves back 3. That's half of that. And he's going to move right there. So that is the wild charge of the Xenomorphs. They damaged the mechanoid, but not 50%, which would have been good. Now, Lynn had asked, does this mean that these guys never get to do a regular activation? And if there's no enemy unit within wild charge range, they do not have to test for a wild charge. So had they been further away from an enemy unit, then they could have activated in the normal activation order when that came up during the turn. But we are now in the wild charge phase, which kind of precedes all of that stuff. And speaking of wild charges, these xenomorphs have some berserk infantry right here who are in range of these light infantry and these heavy infantry over here. So Lynn, you could pick one of those two to try to wild charge. You're going to have to wild charge, it looks like.
The berserk infantry are going to charge the heavy infantry because the big xenomorph wants to have a chance to throw up on the other guys.
Okay. So this xenomorph here is going to try to vomit on these light infantry over here. He probably still could, because if the berserk infantry were attacking the light infantry, they would charge. Somebody would lose. Somebody would have to retreat.
Yeah, I don't want him to get vomited on, and I don't want a black line of sight.
I don't think they can get vomited on, but you might block line of sight. So yeah, that's a pretty good point. Okay, so you're going to roll 5+ to see if these berserk infantry are going to charge these heavy infantry.
So they need a 5+.
They need a 5+. And they get it.
Charge!
Charge! And all you need is to have one unit make contact, but you're supposed to try to get as many units in contact as you can, but that doesn't really affect the number of dice rolled. It's still going to be 10 dice. So berserk infantry, more than anything else, they love to charge. So the berserk infantry are attacking the heavy infantry. The berserk infantry have high-powered blades, and that means that that's going to reduce the armor value of the heavy infantry by 1, taking it from 3 down to 2. Berserk infantry hit on a 4+, so they love hand-to-hand. Okay, so you got 3, huh? That could have been better.
Could have been a lot better.
So the heavy infantry have an armor of 2 because of the high-powered blades, so you got 1 wound. So 1 infantryman is chopped down by the berserk infantry. Fortunately for the heavy infantry, they have a defense value of 4+, and I think that was buffed because they went from a 5-man unit to a 10-man unit. So because there's more of them, because of the upgrade, they are better in hand-to-hand, which I guess makes sense. So they are attacking on a 4+. So defense value of 4+. And they got just 2. What is your armor on your berserk infantry?
2.
2. That's enough to kill 1. So 1 berserker is eliminated. So since they each caused 1 casualty, that means that the attacker retreats. So you back up half your movement. You can go around cover, you can go straight back, you can go where you want. You just can't end up within 1 inch of another unit.
They're going to go back here.
Okay, they're going to hide. Get in some cover. Okay, so that's the end of the wild charge phase. So your lesser xenomorphs moved, your berserkers moved. Now you have some heavy infantry right here, and your greater xenomorph right here. So, who's going to try to activate?
The big xenomorph.
The big xeno. So for the greater xenomorph, you have some options. You can try to attack on a 5+. He can move for free, so that just means you don't have to roll. He can just automatically move. Or you can shoot on a 6+. Are you going to try to vomit on that light infantry? So the question is, if the greater xenomorph shoots at the light infantry, can they shoot back? And yeah, they have a skill called Firefight, which means they can attempt to shoot back if they're being shot at. They have to roll a 7+ to successfully engage in a firefight. And that doesn't affect their future activation, so they could get in a firefight now and then shoot on their own activation later. Now, alternatively, you could just have him charge in if he's within range.
I think he will charge in.
Okay. So the greater xenomorph is charging in to this unit of light infantry. He could vomit on them at range, but he's going to charge in instead. So you do need to roll for that activation. If he was just moving, it would be free. You could just do it. But since he's attacking, basically charging in, you need to roll for it.
And he makes it.
What did he get, an 8?
He got an 8.
Okay. All he needed was a 5+. So he has a big high-powered blade here. That is an upgrade, which reduces the armor value of the light infantry by 1. Their armor was only 2 to begin with, so he could mop them up pretty easily here because they will only have an armor of 1. So what is his attack value?
3+.
3+. So all 3s are better. How many is that?
That is 7.
7? 7 hits. on the poor light infantry. So they are basically mowed down by this greater xenomorph. Even if this heavy weapon model was to go away, the unit still has the heavy weapon skill, basically the upgrade. So that's just there as kind of a reminder. But 7 guys go away. So that's not great. But before those casualties are removed, they get to defend. So all of the casualties are tallied up after the attack and the defense. So the light infantry have defense value of 4+. They better make it good because they're not going to be around much longer. And what is the armor on the greater xenomorph?
4.
4, armor of 4. And again, the light infantry have a slightly better defense value than they would normally because they have been upgraded to be a larger size unit. Instead of being a 5-point unit, they are a 10-point unit, which helps them in hand-to-hand. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's pretty good. That's enough to inflict 1 wound on the greater Xeno, and these get thrown away. So the greater Xeno takes 1 wound, but he has definitely won combat. It's 1 wound to 7. So the light infantry are going to have to test their courage because half or more of their total points have been removed from play. If they were more than half strength, they could roll 2 dice for their courage check. They are not, so they have to roll 1 die for their courage check. They are not in cover, but they are within 12 inches of the commander's unit, so that adds 1. But then they have to subtract 1 for each strength point the unit has lost due to the event causing the courage test. So that is 7. So they're going to roll 1 die at a -6. And they got a -1, which means they have routed. They're basically off the board. They have lost heart. But who wouldn't under those circumstances?
Very true.
So these guys have lost heart, and they're going to take off. But they did inflict 1 wound on the greater Xeno, so I guess that is a moral victory.
That is a moral victory.
So the final unit you have to activate are these heavy infantry right here. They have a range of 18. But if you have a missile weapon that shoots greater than 12, you can shoot beyond 18. It's just called extreme range. And so the enemy's armor value goes up when you're shooting at that range. But if you're within 18, it's not an issue. Okay, so the heavy infantry here are going to shoot the support infantry here. So there's different types of cover, heavy cover, light cover. And light cover can be anything from fog to shrubbery to whatever. But if you have a building, that's definitely heavy cover. As long as the majority of the defending unit has cover from the majority of the shooting unit, then they have cover. But in this case, you say you can see 4 of these guys on the support infantry squad, so they're not going to get cover. So a lot of units get some sort of a free action. And by a free action, that means you don't have to roll for it. So heavy infantry, they can shoot for free. They don't have to roll for it. For other units, it might be move is free. I think for elite infantry, they can shoot or move for free. And again, it's not an extra action. It's just an action you do not have to roll for. So if you just want to shoot, you don't have to roll for it. You just let her rip. So this unit here is heavy infantry. There's only 5 of them. So when they shoot, they still roll 10 dice, but they need a 6 to hit. Had they paid for the upgrade to take them to 10 points, so there was 10 of them, when they shot, they could hit on a 5+, so slightly better. Fortunately for these guys, they have a heavy weapon, so that means every 6 that they do roll is going to be 2 hits. So they're rolling 10 dice, need 6s. Oh, that's 4 6s. That's really, really good. So they got 4 6s, so that is actually 8 hits. Fortunately for the support infantry, they have firefight, so they can attempt to shoot while they're being shot at before any casualties are accrued. So they need to get a 7+ to initiate firefight, and they really need this. And they get a 9, so they're going to shoot back. So the support infantry hit on a 4+. Hitting on a 4+. Oh, not good at all. I got 2 6s, but I don't have a heavy weapon like that, so I don't get to double those. So I got 2 hits. I think your armor is 3, right?
My armor is 3.
So that is not enough to cause any wounds. Meanwhile, you caused 8 hits. The support infantry have an armor of 2, so that causes 4 wounds. So that takes out most of them. So they're wiped out. They have 1 strength point left. They're going to have to roll for courage. They're going to roll 1 die. They are by the commander, but let's see, they took 4 hits. So that's a 3, that's a 4, minus 4 is 0. They lose heart and they scatter to the winds. And they didn't cause any casualties on the side of the heavy infantry. Okay, we're going to say that's good right there. We could continue, but I think you get the gist of it. The Xenos did pretty good in the top half of the turn, chewing up a unit of light infantry and a unit of support infantry. And perhaps had we continued the turn, the Marines and the Mechanoid would have gotten some payback. But hopefully this is enough to give you a sense of how some of the basic mechanics work. You know, the wild charges, the hand-to-hand combat, the shooting, the courage tests, and the like. Yeah, we had to refer back to the reference sheet quite a few times as we were kind of working through it, but I think the more we did it, the easier it became, and I think it would become second nature after a little while because the rules are pretty straightforward once you kind of get a handle on a couple of concepts. Okay, folks, I guess that is a wrap on our quick look at Xenos Rampant from Osprey Games, and I can definitely tell this is part of the Rampant series, even though it's a lot more shooty than most of the Rampant games. The heart and soul of Rampant is still in there. If you have any thoughts about Xenos Rampant, Lion Rampant, Dragon Rampant, or anything Rampant, please leave a comment in the comment section. We'd love to hear what you're thinking. We'll be back soon with some more tabletop wargaming stuff, but until then, take care of yourselves, and we will catch you next time.